This must be the year for Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now, this weekend, Disney introduced their latest rendition of A Christmas Carol, and on next weekend, the high school is going to be doing their rendition of A Christmas Carol, and so I got to thinking, next Sunday, which is still nearly 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I will have experienced A Christmas Carol twice already, and so it's probably a good message to be reminded of, though. It's not just a message that we need to hear at Christmas time, but one for us to keep in mind all year long. Ebenezer Scrooge is a greedy, bitter old man. His business partner, Jacob Marley, had died a few years earlier. It's Christmas Eve, and his nephew comes and invites him over for Christmas dinner, and Scrooge doesn't want any part of it. There are some businessmen who are trying to help the poor in the community. They come to Scrooge asking for his assistance, and Scrooge isn't willing to give anything to help them out. And in that process, Scrooge's bitterness and just his unwillingness to help others, is made so apparent. Scrooge's favorite response is, "Bah humbug." As Scrooge went home that night on December 24th, he was fretting about the fact that he was going to be paying an employee to do absolutely nothing the next day on Christmas Day. He was so gripped by his greed and self-centeredness. Well, it was on that night that he was visited by the ghost of his former business partner. That one who probably was cut from the same mold as Scrooge. One who was equally as greedy and bitter and crotchety as Scrooge. One who shared Scrooge's cynicism for life. But in death, he's trying to warn Scrooge that it's not too late for him to change his ways. And as the ghost of Jacob Marley visits Scrooge, he says, "I wear the chains I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it of my own free will, and my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" Jesus said a similar thing. Actually, 1,800 years before Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. But Jesus put it this way. He said, "Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." Now, in Dickens' story, he's saying that there are eternal rewards for how we lived our life. Those eternal rewards may be good. Those eternal rewards may be bad. The chains that bound Marley in death are the chains that he had made for himself, link by link in life. Now, there are sometimes major events that happen in our lives that will impact us, will change us in a major way. But more often, we are shaped in our life inch by inch, little by little, step by step, link by link. With those decisions that we make one after another that take us down a path. Marley lamented his change, and Scrooge questioned him about them. But Marley asked, "Is its pattern strange to you?" He is telling Scrooge that he, Scrooge, has a way of life just like Marley, and if he doesn't change the way he lives, then Scrooge too will be bound by these chains in death. Well, let's look at Jesus' teaching from Matthew chapter 6, beginning with verse 19. This is a section of Scripture that's often referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. In it, Jesus says some pretty radical and challenging things. He sets a standard pretty high. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So, Jesus warns his disciples that they should not store up for themselves treasures on this earth. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells another parable of a person who's had a bountiful harvest. And the bountiful harvest, the person with the bountiful harvest, his solution was that he needed to build more and more barns for storage in order that he could keep what he has, in order that he could kick back and take it easy in his retirement. Well, Jesus says that that's not the right approach. As God has blessed you, the approach isn't, how can I hold on to what I have, but how can I be a conduit of generosity to help others? And what Jesus said to that farmer in Luke chapter 12 was, he said, tonight your life will be demanded of you. And then what will you have to show? What good are your treasures that you've laid up for yourself here on earth? In this passage, Jesus says that we should not value possessions enough to seek them, nor should we value possessions enough to worry about them. When it comes to possessions, those are the two things that we spend most of our time doing. Figuring out how can we get more possessions, and also worrying about how can we hold on to what we have. The next section in Matthew 6 tells us why we should not seek after possessions nor worry about them. And the reason is that we should trust God. We can trust God with the resources coming our ways. Jesus said, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust will destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Now, let's try and understand this passage in the context of the day in which Jesus was telling. I found it interesting that the Greek word translated as thieves actually means mud digger. Now that may seem like an odd thing to call a thief, but in that day, a house was made out of mud walls, or was made out of sun-dried bricks, which was made out of mud. And so when someone broke into your home, often what they did was they dug through the side of your home. They were a mud digger, and once they dug into the side of your home, then they would steal your valuables or steal your lockbox at that point. Now the wealthy, some of them tried to safeguard their wealth in other ways. They would invest their money with the money changers. That was the equivalent of a banker in our day. Some would even put their money on deposit at the temple. And the reason that they would put their money on deposit at the temple was that the thieves had some fear of God in them, and so they were afraid to steal from the temple for fear that they might steal God's money at that point. And so they were safer if they left their money on deposit or for safety's sake at the temple. Also, some people would dig a hole in the ground or put it in a cave, and what would happen if they put possessions, some fine outfit in a hole in the ground, it would be destroyed by moths, or maybe if they would put their coins in the ground, then they would begin to rust. Well, we do the same thing, only a little bit differently. We try to safeguard our wealth. We try to figure out how to hold on to it. We put it in banks. We put it in investments. I've known people who have buried valuables under their house. I know of people who have taken valuables and hidden them in their attics. Now, there's nothing wrong with managing our money wisely. As a matter of fact, that's a part of being a good steward, is managing our money wisely.